Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to wait a couple minutes before we begin.
Hello, everyone. Nice to have you here. So it's 7:03. We'll wait for another couple of minutes, and Yvette will take the lead at 7:05. That's okay. All right, Yvette, it's 7:05.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. We're really excited to present and tell you more about how to turn your abstract into a poster. I'm going to now share my screen and get started with the presentation. All right, our presentation this evening is called From Abstract to Poster. My name is Dr. Yvette Lowry. I am a family nurse practitioner. I have been teaching nursing across undergraduate and graduate programs for the last 8 years or so, and at all levels. I primarily love to teach DNP students, and I love to see how their initial thoughts about research is later transformed into publication, dissemination, etc. So I was really excited to just give my thoughts about how to do this and encourage you to display your research. And I will now introduce Dr. Bim, if you would like to say a few words about yourself before I get started.
Thank you, Dr. Larry. My name is Dr. Bim McIntyre. Please call me Bim. I only ask that my students call me Doctor. I'm the Associate Dean for the Master's Program at University of Maryland School of Nursing. And prior to that, I was the Program Director for the Adult Juror Acute Care MP program. I was a Program Director when we transitioned from a Master's to a DNP specialty in 2014, 2015. By academic preparation, I hold a PhD, but I'm an honorary DNP. So I taught every course throughout the DNP program, and I've been a part of our DNP project dissemination or implementation and dissemination courses. So part of my responsibility was mentoring DNP students, and that included working on their projects, including presentations and also publications. So I was also, just like Dr. Larry, excited about this opportunity. Glad to be here.
So thank you for joining us. All right, so our objectives for this evening, we would like for you to understand the significance and benefits of presenting and how it can impact your overall career growth. We also want to encourage you to create your poster from your doctoral work after your final dissemination done with your program. There are some schools that don't make students create a poster. Many will encourage you to disseminate by a conference or creating a poster. However, because of the timing of it, is not always a mandate or a requirement. So we really are encouraging you to take what you've done or what you will be doing with your doctoral project and displaying it for others to see. We also would like for you to understand some of the considerations for presenting, some of what is within the rubric or criteria for dissemination, and just some examples of where you can present your poster. So poster presentations are a great method of showcasing your research. So one of the common themes with students is feeling like their work is not great enough to display, but we really want to explain to you that this is not the case. You know, everything that you worked for within your doctoral program, or if you're working towards it currently, we really want you to show the hard work that you've put into it. You know, it's blood, sweat, and tears. So, you know, you should definitely put your information out there, and you just never know where it would take you once you do that. And so we're going to talk to you in more detail about submission guidelines, and again, just some example methods of displaying your poster and giving information about your research. So again, it's important, although you were a student working on your research for quality improvement, you want to explain your data and findings, you know, be proud of what you did, and you are contributing to nursing practice, you are making improvements, and you're also within your doctoral studies showcasing another area of research that needs to continue on, most likely. Most of us have additional considerations, or maybe there were limitations on our project that if someone else were to do a project similar, or if there was replication involved, then you know that you're just adding to the body of what we want to do to move our profession forward. So definitely, you know, we encourage you to just create the poster, and many times you don't even have to talk about your poster. Sometimes it's just creating it, and the conference or the method that you are submitting it will display it for you. So sometimes it's not even you standing there and discussing your poster, which is, you know, for those of us that are still getting used to public speaking, we may feel more comfortable submitting a poster that is just going to be viewed by an audience, and maybe you allowed to answer questions later. So here's some examples of opportunities to present your poster. This could be in person or virtual. So there are now, since the pandemic has occurred, there have been many opportunities for dissemination, especially virtually. And so, like I said before, there are some conferences that will allow you to submit, and they have a separate section within their conference that will display the posters, and it will have your email information, and the people who view your poster will just send you questions or just comments. And then there are other conferences that will have you to do very short oral presentations in regards to your poster. So I have done a few that have asked me to just talk about what I did, really kind of explaining my abstract and not really going into too many details within my poster, but a 5 to 10 minute oral presentation on my research and what I feel I have added to nursing practice by completing my doctoral studies. Blogs are another way, maybe not necessarily your abstract, but just the general topic of what you did within your doctoral study and what your thought is for future research. Minority Nurse is actually a very good one to submit to. They usually will post what you blog within a day or two. I've done a few related to minority nursing faculty shortages. So they are very receptive to really, anything that you have to say. They do have guidelines on their website about the length and the references that you need to add with that. Publications, when you're deciding on publications to look at, take a look at your literature review section. There's typically common themes among what you did for that section of your doctoral work. So there's typically a few journals that you used more so to provide support for your topic. That's usually a great place to start because those have the same initiatives or correlate very closely to your project. So with my students, that's typically where I'm telling them to take a look for their manuscript submissions and just their general publication of the shortened version of their scholarly paper. So just some things to think about as you're working on your doctoral studies. What are the common themes of where you're obtaining your support for your study? So again, so nursing organizations, conferences, these are just some examples that I listed, but there are so many. We all have state organizations. We have local sections of our state organizations. And then there's sometimes regional or even state conferences, and then of course the national. So there are always mechanisms of you being able to present. And I know, check with your universities, even if you are alumni or a current student, there are some universities that have research day, or they have their own research conferences where they invite other schools or maybe just encourage their own students to present their work. And they usually are very, very welcoming to displaying anything that you as a student have done, because you are a product of what they want to see. So that's also another great way of displaying your information. I know it doesn't really fall under nursing organization, but I wanted to make sure to bring that up because we encourage, me as a faculty, we're always encouraging students to join in on research day and to display what they've been doing, and also make us look good. So, that's just another mechanism of dissemination to think about. So here are just some general components of an abstract. It's typically a very short and concise version of your scholarly paper or your full proposal. So you really want to think about how to hit the highlights and summarize the information in a way where you are able to showcase what you did, what your passion was, as well as following it up with brief data. And the data really should be the most significant findings within your study that really will speak to what you uncovered or what you did, whether it was what you set out to do or what was maybe a finding that you weren't expecting. And then it's also great to include the key words that correlate specifically to your proposal or your project. So there are some abstracts that are written in a full paragraph, but then you have some that are written more like in a sentence structure where it's listed just like you see on the screen. You'll see a problem and then a colon, and someone will list a sentence. I have done them either way, and it really just kind of depends on the submission guidelines, because some are specific about how they want it to be displayed because they want uniformity with the submissions. But overall, this is what you would want to include in the abstract: the problem statement and the project purpose, which these are very similar. So this kind of could be grouped into one. And then again, the overall project design: was it qualitative, quantitative, mixed study? You know, what were the ways that you collected your data? And then how did you analyze the data? How did it show significance to your research question? And then a blanket statement in regards to further practice or how you contributed to a current guideline or practice within our field. Would you like to present your example here, Ben? You're muted. You want me to stop my share?
Yeah, sorry about that. Absolutely. If you could stop sharing, then
Okay.
I'll be able to share my screen.
All right.
All right, so wonderful. Thank you very much for that. And honestly, I mean, I don't want to say it's that simple, but just like Dr. Lowry just presented, it really is straightforward. So I'm hoping to make this a little more interactive. How many of us have submitted an abstract for something? Either individually, as a group, as part of a team. You can either unmute and answer, or you can put it in the chat. Okay, so Justin says,
Great.
Not yet. Others?
I think there's a certain level of comfort presenting in a smaller setting, like if you're part of your local nurses association or just an organization that you may be more immersed in. So just kind of think about that. And now, especially because of the pandemic, there have not been as many submissions. So if you ever are thinking about submitting and you see on the submission deadline that they're extending it another 3 days or a week, that means that they probably did not get the number of submissions that they wanted. And so that is another great opportunity to submit and again showcase your work. I actually tried to submit to one of the larger organizations, National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculty. It did not get accepted. However, it did not stop me from trying to learn more about their process. They had a workshop about their specific guidelines. And so I could think back into me submitting, and I don't think I really paid close enough attention to their submission guidelines after it was shown to me on the reviewer side. So now I'm a reviewer for the submissions that will be coming up in the conference. So I just say that to say, it is worth the attempt. most times you will get accepted. I've probably submitted 10 of them within the last year and a half, and I have only been declined one time. And that's because I was told they actually have a large submission. So
Yeah, and I think the best advice you just gave is, listen, if you want to do anything in nursing right now, this is the time to do it. With the changing faces of nursing, too, and I mean this in the most humble and the nicest way possible, nursing is aging. In addition to that, the pandemic has really been hard on a lot of nurses. So a lot of nurses who are, what's this, the AACN statistic is that over 50% of practicing nurses are over the age of 50. So a lot of nurses during the pandemic did a self-reflection and decided, you know what? I've been thinking about retiring, and a lot of nurses have retired. That's a domino. Whenever we think about that, we only think about bedside nursing, but that's not true. That impacts every aspect of nursing, in nurse leadership, academia, advanced practice nursing. So if you were thinking of presenting, publishing, submitting anything to a journal, this is the time to do it. Not that you wouldn't be accepted, any other time, but if you were just sort of looking for that springboard, to at least get yourself, to get a lot more confidence, this is the time to do it. So also that question I asked was not to shame anyone. It was just to sort of get a better sense of, who my audience is. So I'm going to leverage on a few things Dr. Lowry said earlier, and she mentioned some programs that require poster presentations. For the DNP, it is a professional responsibility to disseminate your work, so, and even if you don't owe it to the profession, you actually owe it to yourself because you put a lot of work into that. Some of us have our unique specialties, our niche areas, what we're interested in, and that usually would show depending on what your DNP project topic was. How do you become, or how are you considered a subject matter expert? So if I were looking at something and someone says, oh, you should talk to Jasmine Barry, like she is an expert in X. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look you up to see what work you've done. What have you published? What have you, so in terms of sort of growing your professional career, that's a reason to do it. Another reason is if you were thinking academia, I know a lot of us are clinical practice and it doesn't count immediately, but if you're thinking long-term, if you ever decide to, going to academia, that's something that we sort of academics look at, published, so just something to think about. So I'm going to share a couple of examples. So Dr. Lowry's done a fabulous job just sort of providing a background, a foundation we can work with. And I'm going to provide just 3 steps, and I'll show 2 specific examples. So the first step is what Dr. Lowry already mentioned, and she has to give a personal account. You have to look at the abstract or poster guidelines. It's just like publishing. The publisher tells you exactly what they're looking for. Now, let me be honest, depending on where you submit to, there is some competition. So just like her, I'm also a reviewer. I'm a poster reviewer for NOF, National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculty. And they get hundreds of abstracts. I don't know anyone. I mean, I just look at the guidelines. That's all I look at. And I look at the abstract, if it makes sense, they meet, the vision, or the goal for that conference that year, and everything checks off, I'll recommend they accept. And if you're off, then unfortunately that's an indication to me that, maybe you didn't pay enough attention to to the guidelines. So that's number one. The second thing is creating the abstract. And honestly, I don't want to say that's the easiest part. Maybe it's just the way my brain works. but some people do an abstract before they write a paper. For me, it's easier to like write the paper first and just go into the paper and just like take chunks out and slap a whole bunch of stuff into an abstract, go through it and streamline it. So the recommendation here is to, if you haven't, presented your DMP project, that would be a good place to start. You have all the information in there. Everything's in there. It would be nice to do a quick lit review to make sure since the last time you looked at it, nothing has changed in the evidence. But if you're confident that the evidence is the same, then you have all the information you need. So like Dr. Lowry presented earlier, your purpose, your goal, your methods, your results and conclusion. You have all that in your DMP project already. Now you just need to put it together. And then the last thing, and that's the fun part for me, that's creating the poster. So Dr. Lowry talked about submitting for NOM. What was the deadline? Was it like Monday night or something weird?
Yeah, it was actually, I think originally, because there was a workshop like mid-September, and then I think we had like 2 weeks before we get assigned to the abstracts. I think we got an email with the abstracts. It was either yesterday or today. I feel like my days are going by, but originally I think the abstracts were due like the 30th, and then they extended it till the end of last week, and then we just got notified that we were assigned to review again either yesterday or today.
So I know that because I snuck it under the wire. I submitted my abstract, I think at 10 p.m. and it was due at midnight. And once again, I went to something we'd published and I was like, you know what, this would be a good opportunity. I want to go to NOM, and if you guys attend conferences, just that additional encouragement to attend the conference is when I present. So I'm a member of several organizations. I don't want to spend a whole bunch of money going to different conferences, even though conferences are more than just presenting. It's a great opportunity to network,
Right.
grow your network nationally. But I want to present, so I've sort of made it a point that if I attend, I'm presenting. So I've done a lot of presenting, so enough of that. I'm going to show you two examples and I'm going to practice what I preach. So I completed my PhD in 2011 and my dissertation focused on atrial fibrillation patients. I compared pharmacologically managed atrial fibrillation patients with patients who were ablated. And I presented my dissertation work. So if you look at some of this information, it's going to say 2012. It's not because I'm losing my mind, it's because I wanted to use an actual example. So I'm going to share my screen. So step one is reviewing the abstract or poster instructions. 1 second. So you sort of shrink this so you can see it a little bit. All right. So this was the PCNA conference in 2012, and this was at the National Harbor, Maryland. What's actually interesting is PCNA holds their conference or their annual conference in Vegas, which is awesome because then I've been to Vegas several times to present, but this was at the Gaylord, so it was local. And this was really helpful. So this is where I would typically start. Some poster presentation guidelines are very generic. This was kind of nice because this was actually tailored to this specific conference. So there was a congratulatory message. There was a mention that my poster would be one of 27 posters that would be presented on this day. There was specific information about how to set up and remove my poster. This is really important. So right now, technology is a lot better, right? So depending on where you go, I mean, I've been to a conference where there were large, LED TV screens, and our posters were displayed on these screens. But for some conferences, you actually have to go out and print your poster, print it in paper, and put it in this little tube holder, and you get on the plane with that. It's an actual like 3 foot by 6, 3 by 5 foot poster. And when you actually, get there, you put it on a board, you use thumbtacks, and you hook it up to the board, and you stand in front of your poster, and that's the expectation. You stand there and you present your poster. So the recommendations here, to make your poster presentation a success, bring at least one box of thumbtacks, right? I mean, I don't even know if they still do this now, but I think some conferences still do. Bring a label with your name and, your presentation. Some other people will tell you to bring a bunch of business cards, because people are going to stop by your display. They'll ask questions. Even if they don't ask questions, I would typically engage people and say, hey, if you have any questions, and you sort of get into it. I leave a bunch of my business cards because people might have questions about that to reach out to you. But anyway, hotel information that's very specific to this conference. And I don't know how others learn. This is an easy way to learn. I'm a visual learner. So once I see something like this, then I understand exactly what my poster should look like when it's completed. So if you think about the aspects Dr. Lowry mentioned earlier, so this conference specifically wants you to, put in your entire abstract on one side. Then you break it up into, small sections. So your introduction, your methods, they want to see results, they want figures. This is kind of nice because you don't want to post it, it's got just all text, and it's kind of hard to read, or to get the gist of it. So if you have a table, you present this here, and then your conclusions. And they wanted this to be 4 foot by 8 foot. So I remember printing this, and it cost me like $120 to print it. So this is the first step. So now I understand what the expectations are. I go back, I look at my paper, or whatever information I'll draw from, and just basically start to gather this information, because this is then what goes into your abstract that gets reviewed. So I have the abstract for this conference. I'll share that next.
And you might just want to ask your school if they have a print shop, because sometimes the schools, if you're going in person, they will actually print your poster for you with no charge if you give them the dimensions that you need. So just look into your potential resources too.
So that's a fantastic point. And if you heard me talk just a couple of minutes ago about getting my abstract in under the wire, you would probably figure out that I waited till the last minute to print my poster. So I ended up paying for it myself. But you're right, not only your school, but if this is a hospital-based initiative, odds are they would also absorb that cost. So that's a really good point. Also, when I show you the poster itself, one of the things that I like to do is I like to represent whatever organization has supported me to get there. So if it's your school, if it's the hospital organization you work with, inquire if they have a template, and that's what you use. So you're kind of repping your organization there. So based on my dissertation and the author guidelines, this was my abstract. And my dissertation was 300 pages long. And this abstract was like a very small page. So basically, I mean, the goal is to truly synthesize all that information into something that's easily digestible, by the abstract review committee. So most conferences or organizations where you would likely present your abstract would have a committee of professionals like you and I, who would review all the abstracts and make recommendations in terms of what gets reviewed, what gets presented or what doesn't. Sometimes if they really like your work, but they have a lot of submissions, they could tell you, to consider submitting the next year, and that's acceptable too. I've also been in a situation where I was an abstract review and I also submitted an abstract, and I just, recused myself, or I made it known so I wasn't assigned to my own abstract, just for conflict of interest. So here, based on the author guidelines, they ask for a background. I give a very brief background. And so there's usually a word count, and Dr. Lowry said 500. For some conferences or whatever, it could be 400, it could be 500. That's not a lot of words, like you will quickly run out of space. So you would notice a couple of things in this abstract. There are no references. You don't need references in your abstract. The expectation is that the reference would either be in your paper or when you present your poster, and I'll show you a section for references. So the information you present here has to be like the meaningful information, what you want people to take away. Depending on who you ask or where you go, some people would say no abbreviations in an abstract. And I've always pushed back against that, because if you look at this abstract and you look at all the abbreviations, if I had to spell atrial fibrillation, atrial flutter, health-related quality of life, I would run out of space, so I use a lot of abbreviations and no references in the abstract. So I presented my methods, results, and conclusion. The other thing with the abstract is a lot of people won't, for a publication or a presentation, a lot of people may not stop to look at the entire thing. So they might just look at your abstract, get the gist of the work you did, and they're ready to kind of keep it moving. So just kind of do the best you can through the abstract to present your information. Anything you'd like to add, Dr. Larry?
I would just say, kind of echo about the word count. That can be a little challenging. So you want to really be clear and concise and hit the highlights on what, if you could, tell me in, literally 1 minute what your project was about, that is what needs to be in your abstract. That's kind of a good way of thinking about it. You definitely want to be able to showcase what you did, but it is very direct and to the point. And I've also used QR codes on my poster, and that way, whoever is looking at my poster, they can scan it on their phone and they can see my entire paper. So that's another good way if you truly want to display everything that you did, and it's, you wanted to talk more about it or add just more detail about your findings. That is a creative way to do so.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I have two examples. One has the one from 2012, before QR codes were like a big thing, has the references listed out, and the more recent one I'll show actually has QR codes. That's awesome. We're in sync. So now I am going to share the final. No, that's not it. Sorry. All right. So can you see my screen? So my project was a primary quantitative research study, so it's very wordy, so, and I would be the first to tell you, don't make it too wordy because no one will be able to read it, but there was just no way to synthesize this any further. So if you remember the author guidelines, they did ask to have the entire abstract, which I just copied and pasted from what I submitted. So that's done. The introduction, my methods. For the results section, I thought it was a great opportunity to provide the demographic table, and this came directly out of my dissertation. It was like the entire page. Psychological factors, my study results. They wanted tables. I used 3 instruments, and I provided all 3 of them here. And I provided my conclusion. And like I said earlier, QR codes weren't like really popular at this time. So I had my references listed out. This was my first poster presentation, and I am happy to report that I won Best Poster of all the 27 posters. Let me also say that I got a lot of help from these people. So these were members of my dissertation committee, the people that I actually worked with. And I know many of you worked with people on your DMP project committee, so feel free to pull other people into the work. I mean, what I typically say is not only for poster presentations, but for genuine publications that lead to evidence, changing guidelines, you never see sole authors, so feel free to collaborate, and it cuts down on the work. The other thing is using your lenses. When you put this together, it looks perfect. You're like, I'm ready to go. And I send it to Dr. Lowry, and she'd go, I would do this, I would do this, I would make this change. I mean, having other people work with you only makes your work better. So if you look at the poster itself, I was faculty at University of Maryland, so I used a University of Maryland template, which was nice to represent my school. They paid for my attendance at the conference, and typically we have sort of Maryland colors. So I had to make sure that the font and the color and everything sort of worked. Now with as many of these as I've done, looking back, I would probably do some things a little different, because I feel like the black gets lost a little bit in the yellow. But, this is a real example of the work I did, when I completed my program. So I thought, this would be sort of a good example to walk through. So let me stop here and take questions, comments, or clarifications before I go to the second example. And Dr. Lara, feel free to add any comments if you have some too.
I would just say now a common practice, like we talked about the QR codes, right here with the reference, that's a good place. Some people use QR codes just for their references to add more space to the poster. And there's actually a QR code app, and I'll have to find it and tell you what it is, but it's called QR Bot. And it's very, very easy to use. I had no experience making or using QR codes when I started using that specific app, but it will generate a QR code for you. And you can basically copy and paste it into whatever you want. And it's a free app. It's called QR Bot. So
I gotta say, like, it makes your poster look kind of cool too.
It does.
I was like, what is this? And
I'm not really the most technology person, but when I learned that, it made me look good, so I started using it.
Yeah, so I also learned how to do that. And once again, Dr. Larry said something that's really important. I know this poster doesn't look like I need any more space, but you also have to remember this was a 4 by 8 foot poster. So even though it looks pretty cramped up here, it was pretty big. Like, it was very legible, when it came out. It was a pretty big poster, so, but if you needed a little more room, that would be a way to do it. And the other thing I would say is it's helpful that my background was surgical. I spent most of my clinical practice in the surgical ICU, and most of that experience was in the cardiac surgery ICU. I'm kind of a type A personality. Everything is symmetrical, and that's another thing you want to ensure that you pay attention to. I've seen posters where everything is kind of all over the place, and it kind of it projects this sort of disheveled look, so it's always helpful to get someone else to look at it and just make sure your diagrams, your tables, your headings, like everything's like on the same, line. PowerPoint helps with that now. So if you move like an image around, it'll, sort of line them up for you just to make sure you're keeping things symmetrical. Because if I made like an obvious mistake and printed it out on a 4x8 poster, I would only magnify it, so just something to keep in mind. Any other questions or comments before I go to example number 2? And you can unmute if you have a question or a comment.
And that was a good point too. PowerPoint
Gotta
is
be an
a good
interactive
way.
PowerPoint, huh?
PowerPoint is a good way to display a poster, especially virtually. So, kind of makes it easy to move your content around and to play with it, and very easy to construct as far as timing. You really can create a poster in less than an hour, even with editing. So you will already have all your information there and already have an abstract. So this is, again, a great segue into publication.
And I agree with that. It's so much easier to complete your poster in PowerPoint. And there are templates that you can work with, but a recommendation I would make to you is if you're going somewhere else and you're going to present this or project this on someone else's computer, save it as a PDF. I have seen PowerPoint presentations that look perfect to you on your screen. And I've actually seen a lot of this with my students in the past. They would have a presentation and they'd come to class, they'd plug the USB into the class computer and everything is all over the place. It changes the font, changes, so if you save it as a PDF, then you can project it as a PDF, and that way nothing moves around, so that's just something to think about. And also, if you're going to a conference to present a poster, a presentation, email a copy to yourself. Just email a copy to yourself.
That is like,
if you lose your luggage, if your USB decides it needs reformatting,
so
or any type of disaster occurs, and you have 100, or in my case, at some point, 2,000 people waiting for you to present, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But all you need is internet access. You can pull up the presentation. So don't ever leave home without sending your final presentation. Just email it to yourself, and that way it's a really good backup. Someone told me that a long time ago.
Yes, I would say anything important. Yeah.
All right, so I am going to share example number 2. And this was so the first one was PCNA. And this, I'm sorry, not this. Oh, jeez. Forgive me, I have a whole bunch of screens open just so I could pull them up and share with you, so forgive me. Okay, got it. So can you see an AANP conference speaker instruction page?
No, this looks like your previous abstract pulled up.
Okay, so I need to close that. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Let me close it. Technology, sorry. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So once again, I'm starting with the, in this case, they call it the conference speaker system instructions. And they have one set of instructions that cover both podium and poster presentations. So as I mentioned earlier, some of these instructions are very generic. They use them for all their conferences, and for others, it's very specific to that conference, just like I shared earlier. So here's an information about file size and exactly whatever you need to send in. They want the presentations due. I think this was about a month or 2 months in advance. So once again, you have to double check just to ensure that you're meeting the guidelines. And for an accepted poster, if they don't receive your poster, they will reach out, because at that point they're committed to your poster in their conference. So you kind of don't want to be the one who is holding them up. I would know because I've received one of those emails from time to time. Not that funny thing is I'm not necessarily the world's worst procrastinator. I think sometimes I just want to make it perfect and I hold on to it until the last minute rather than just get done and send it. So presentation details here, they ask for a CV or a biosketch. They wanted a minimum of 2 measurable educational objectives. And you could add additional objectives, if you wanted. They didn't give very specific, unlike what Dr. Lowry presented in terms of your aims, and they didn't give you like detailed instructions here. So we went with something that was slightly more traditional. So let me show you what we ended up sending that was accepted. Love technology. So earlier, they asked for a biosketch. So this presentation I did with my colleague at University of Maryland, Shannon Isaac, who is the Associate Dean for the DNP program. Those are our biosketches. This was a 400 word count limit. So like I mentioned earlier, Dr. Lowry's presentation, roughly 500. Here was 400, and this is what we turned in, 399. So that just tells you there's so much information, having to synthesize that. So the poster review committee still sees value in what you're presenting. It's a bit of a challenge, so it's helpful to work with someone else. Shannon and I work very well together because we kind of think in a similar fashion. We will put everything on paper and start cutting it down. And I would probably cut it down to like 500 and send it to her. She'll cut it down some more, send it back. And sort of that synergy was what helped us sort of get to our final. So we wrote a purpose, review of literature, summary of our innovation or practice. This focused on a collaborative practice grant between the University of Maryland School of Nursing and University of Maryland Upper Chesapeake Hospital, where we created a partnership that placed about 10 students, 10 DNP, APRN students in the hospital a year. And our goal was to help improve, sort of that relationship, one, support the preceptors there, two, and three, hopefully create a pipeline. So after those rotations, students would likely, apply for jobs in that rural hospital. The grant itself did very well. So it was a 5-year grant, 10 students a year for a total of 50 students. We ended up placing over 320 students. So once again, you have to own the results of your work, and sort of be proud of it. And two, once again, professional responsibility. We've presented that in several forms. So implication for nursing or NPs, depending on what your audience is. So we actually published this in JONA, Journal of Nurse Administrators, I think. And it was easy to just go into that write-up we did already, and we just took the information out. You shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel or recreate anything. You've done the work and you have all the information. So, and now I'm going to show you what the final product looked like. Now I'm one of the cool kids. I don't know if you can see my QR code where the references should be. So this was the final based on what was submitted. So once again, we had our objectives, our background. We included a project goal. This time, if you notice, not as wordy, but also we had the opportunity to include a little bit of graphic just to soften it up a little bit. Looking at this background, once again, I used the University of Maryland background. I included all the people that supported the grant, even though I think Shannon and I were the only ones that sent it. But when it was time to do the presentation, we included everyone in the grant. Went with a slightly different background this time, so the black on white sort of popped a little better. That black and yellow 4x8, a little more legible, but you can see what some of the challenges would be. And yeah, so this was our presentation. And I think this presentation won second best poster. So I'm kind of spoiled now, but all this information basically came from a combination of the abstract and the paper. Anything you want to add, Dr. Larry?
No, I love the formatting of this and very, very easy to read. I would say that if you have any graphs or illustrations to share about your data, that's always a good way of displaying it on a poster, kind of brings attention to it. And so I like it. And the results in the center of it also brings good attention to it as well.
And like you said earlier, sometimes you write in full sentences. For the results here, we just created bullet points because we knew it was easy to talk through it. We didn't have to write in full sentences, and that sort of aerates the poster a little better. And also we could just, follow the graph, and basically, so the gray was our projected outcome and the red was our actual outcome. And putting that in sort of graphical presentation really shows how much we exceeded the expectations, of the grant. So this is kind of one of those pictures, tell 1,000 words, and it got a lot of attention. A lot of people came by, asked questions, wanted to know how they could replicate our model, so that was very helpful. And I will hand it back to you.
All right, I really just had my references to show. So I'm not even going to share my screen again, but I would just, in closing, say that the textbooks that you have for your doctoral program, all of them have a breakdown of what should be included in your manuscript, but there's also specific guidelines on how to create an abstract. And in your APA manual, the 7th edition also has a section in the book about what's important to put in an abstract. And as usual, looking at examples are a good way to kind of help you think about how you would set it up. And again, if you use PowerPoint, it's a good way to be able to move your content around very quickly and kind of at least visualize how you want to see it. And just be creative, work with a partner, have someone else give you feedback. Your instructors or faculty are also good resources for you to just bounce ideas off. They would be, over the moon and, willing to give you that additional support, even if you've been graduated for some time. They are always usually very excited about any student that is willing to present and show what they did while, they were in school. So,
And in addition, I would just like to encourage everyone, a lot of DNP projects don't go the way we plan, and we keep emphasizing DNP projects, but you could create a poster presentation on anything, even in what you're doing today, because your focus might have changed a little bit, your population of interest might have changed a little bit. But I remember one of my students, and this was probably a couple years ago, her DNP project involved terminal extubations in the surgical ICU. And she had, obviously, just like everyone else, about 6 months to implement her project, collect data. And she was freaking out because her projected N was probably about 20. And she only had 2 patients. And she wanted to change her topic. And I said, no, like, we're going to take what the hospital gives us. Like, you can't change your topic. And so she ended her DNP with, an N of 2. She wasn't really excited about it. And one of the requirements was this dissemination. She had to present that at a national conference. She had applied, and her poster was accepted to present at some, I think it was a national organization. She went there, that was, before the pandemic, and she presented it, and she won best poster. I know I keep talking about best poster, and those are just all coincidental, but her poster stood out to me because of how concerned she was, about the fact that she had a small N, and she just didn't think it was worth sharing. That's sort of my challenge and encouragement to you, that whatever it is you've done, disseminate it. That's how you become synonymous with whatever your area of expertise is as a subject matter expert. So I'm just, any opportunity you get. And right now, if it's, if you're presenting at a lunch and learn, at a unit-based, or annual annual conference at your hospital, your institution,
your school, yeah.
school, the state level, the national level, you got to start somewhere. And then once you start, I don't want to say it's easy, but
you'll be more comfortable with it. You won't feel as intimidated with it. And it is somewhat addicting because it's gratifying once you get accepted.
It is.
So.
And once again, a very smart woman once said to me early in my career, she said, everything you present, you should publish. And everything you publish, you should present. So a lot of times, once you create, a poster presentation, it sort of leads into a publication, so many opportunities that way. Any questions, any thoughts, any clarification you'd like to make? Anything anyone would like to share? We haven't heard any voice tonight, by the way, just mine and Dr. Larry's.
It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it. I'm always, trying to encourage people to, anyone I know, if I find out you're a doctoral student, I'm like, make sure you present, because some schools don't encourage you to. And, especially DNPs of color, we have to stand out. We need to make our mark, and we need to let it be known that we have some great contributions as well. So very, very important. Highly, highly recommend that you present what you've done, because I'm sure that it's great work. We're all passionate about, if you're in a doctoral program, you're overly passionate. So go ahead and let everybody see what you've done.
All right, and thanks for the kind comments and in the chat box. Dr. Lowry and I are also co-chairing the DNPs of Color Research Committee. So we'll be back online. So if you're interested, if you want to hear more about, how to publish, if you need support, Dr. McKamey is doing a lot of work, in identifying mentorship for our DNPs. There'll be very many opportunities, so just stay tuned, and hopefully we can create not only opportunities, but value for you. So if you need to reach us, reach out to us. We're happy to help and to support you. If you'd like us to
Definitely.
look over your posters, we're happy to do that too.
Thank you for that. I'm Dr. Jasmine Berry. I was driving on 285 earlier, so I definitely didn't want to type in the chat, but I definitely needed you guys before 12 o'clock on October 8th before I submitted my poster for the conference. But this was great information. I'm definitely a procrastinator, trying to be a reformed procrastinator.
You are not alone.
So thank you for the great information.
All right, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to pick on you earlier.
Oh no, I was like, wait, that's my name. Okay, I'll hit him back later once I'm zooming in and out of traffic.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you guys, and thank you for your time and your kind attention.
Yes.